Hi, everyone. Welcome to the governance update from VLGA Connect. I know it's the highlight of Steve Cooper's week. I hope it's the highlight of yours. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Chris. I'm feeling highlighted. Thanks for that.
Indeed. Nice to see you. And thank you for being with us for our global executive panel this week that we had with the UK and Australia on community wellbeing. Wasn't it a terrific discussion?
That was an outstanding discussion with a couple of executives from the Council of Barking and Dagenham in London,
Yep.
and also from Hawkesbury Shire in New South Wales, and our own Kathy Henderson from Moreland. And a lot of different experiences, but a terrific conversation around the impacts of COVID on community.
So great speakers, they really, really were. And that program, for those who weren't able to be there live, will be available to members as a member benefit once our whiz, Mr. JLF, has a chance to put his touch on it. So, we should give him a couple of days.
Absolutely worth a look, Chris. Yeah.
Indeed. Steve, there's quite a bit happening. I know you've got a list. I've got a list. How about we go turnabout? And I'll start with the top of my list, and that is another report from the Victorian Ombudsman this week about parking review processes in councils, and it's highlighted another 5 councils and 2 authorities that have now, I think, either done or committed to implementing refund schemes because some legal doubt has been cast over the process that was used to review those fines. We talked about this last year, didn't we?
We did indeed. And again, Chris, of course, by way of disclosure, I was employed in a related role at one of the affected councils. So anything I say should be taken in that context. I think there's no great surprise. The outsourcing of those review decisions was a common practice for councils and those agencies at that time. And so once the first tranche of councils were caught up in that it was extended shouldn't be a surprise. I suppose the lesson for me now, as was then, Chris, is the importance of risk assessment and taking nothing as assumed, and particularly around issues of delegations and authorities that they are in fact in place.
So pretty clear outcome, obviously, is that no one would be outsourcing the actual review of those fines when challenged in the future.
Well, the Ombudsman's made her views on that topic particularly clear and unambiguous, Chris. So, there's a very clear message there.
What have you got on your list, Steve? One from you.
I've just got a couple of things. Actually, let's start with climate action plans and the fact that the Northern Alliance on Greenhouse Action, www.naga.org.au, that's a body of the councils, Hume, Whittlesea, Nillumbik, Moreland, Darebin, Banyule, Melbourne, Yarra and Manningham, have produced a draft or a climate action plan guide to help councils with implementing their climate action plans into their council plan. It's available as a resource to councils, but also the Northern Alliance on Greenhouse Action is looking for feedback from councils on the usefulness or utility of that document. And I think it's part of a recurring theme that we've been talking about, Chris, about the role of the elected council in oversighting the development and implementation of strategic plans and putting that into their integrated strategic planning framework, if that's not a mouthful. And who knew? Start with measurement and then develop some action. So I think it's a great resource and would encourage anyone to use it.
Steve, I think it's terrific that this alliance, and there's a number of them that councils are very instrumental in driving in different regions, are providing that sort of added value and really demonstrating their worth, I think, to the sector more broadly.
I think so, Chris. The fact that it's an example of A, a really important issue, B, councils collaborating and pooling resources to get the expertise to deal with, in fact, in this case, an international, state and national, state and regional issue on a collaborative basis, and C, putting out resources that are useful for the wider sector and dealing with these matters in a strategic, bang for buck kind of way rather than ad hocery.
Look, it just makes so much sense. You can just picture all these new councillors sitting around the table, developing the council plan, having the climate change conversation, and probably going, where do we start? So I think this is going to be a very, very useful tool.
Look, and I think too, Chris, it's about that capacity building on. For a lot of new councillors, I'm sure no one told them that a part of the role is that oversight of strategy and policy, and having an approach that is rigorous and accountable, but also functional, policy rather than politics, is really important in terms of not only climate change, but dealing with diversity and inclusion matters, dealing with allocation of resources on a strategic basis, dealing with the capital works plan, again, strategically. So really good capacity building opportunity for councillors.
All right, back to my list.
So
the VEC has sent out 350,000 apparent failure to vote notices after the elections last year.
Can we do banter, Chris? And I'll just say, that sounds like a lot.
Yes, Steve, it is a lot, but it's not as many as last time, as the 2016.
Really?
Yes, and if you listen to the local government news roundup, the roundup that's not toxic, I spoke with the VEC's Manager of Communications, Marie Guerin, about this, and they're looking into why that number is so much lower this time around. Obviously, a COVID election, everybody doing it by post is going to be one of those elements that have impacted, but there will be others as well. I thought that was a really interesting stat. And the other takeaway message here is if you're one of those people, and I'm sure most of our audience are councillors, aspiring councillors, council officers, etc., you would have voted, I'm sure. But if you're one of those people that got an apparent failure to vote notice, the important thing is to respond and explain why it appears you haven't voted to avoid a fine.
Every council election, we always know someone who didn't vote and got a notice and wonders what to do about it. So that's really sound advice. Respond. Don't leave it.
All right. So keep an eye on that one. Back to your list.
Chris, I've got the fact that the Gender Equality Act commencement is imminent, apparently. And in fact,
we're back into the imminent file. We haven't drawn anything out of that for a while.
No, and I'm anticipating that a lot more imminent in this current calendar year, Chris. So 31st of March, and I noticed on the implementation matters last week from Local Government Victoria that an offer has been received from LGV, the Victorian Public Service Commission, and the Commissioner for Gender Equality for councils to participate in the State Government Annual People Matters Survey for the purpose of that very important first step of collection of data as a baseline for action taken in the future. And what a terrific initiative, and which I know has been communicated to CEOs to at least ease that administrative burden associated with the implementation of the Act and get some good data in the first instance that's capable of being benchmarked.
I think that's an extremely useful offer to the sector. There's a lot of money spent around the sector on climate surveys, pulse surveys, etc. The People Matters survey across the public sector is very highly regarded. Extending that to councils, I think at this particular time when they have to develop all those measures under the Gender Equality Act and the workforce planning provisions of the Act, I think it's a really useful thing to do. The other key thing that comes to mind, Steve, that I'm sure you're cognizant of is the VLGA's capacity to assist in this space.
Look, that's true, Chris, and thank you for mentioning that. Our diversity and inclusion lead, Deborah Wu, is rather expert on these and other related topics, and certainly for VLGA members, if you've got queries about implementation, contacting Deborah via the VLGA contact points, please do that, because there are other steps in terms of the assessment of services, policies and programs, the obligations working through a gender equality action plan. And whilst there are a range of organisations that are on state government panels in terms of doing this work, Deborah is certainly available to help member councils to navigate their way through that.
Good tip. Back to my list, I just want to send a quick note of congratulations to Tim Tamlin, who's a really nice guy, former CEO of South Gippsland Shire for 10 years and a senior executive in local government prior to that. Just been announced as the interim CEO of the City of Kingston. Of course, that vacancy came up because Julie Reid has recently transitioned across to Local Government Victoria in the executive director role. So well done, Tim.
Chris, I don't want to agree with you too often, but on that score, yes, Tim Tamlin, nice fellow. And yeah, good decision by Kingston to see them through the appointment of a new CEO.
Yes, so I think that appointment is to the end of October, so that gives you the period of time in which they're expecting to make that process occur. And some final notes from you, Steve. I'm sure you've got more.
In fact, I thought you were going to mention, Chris. In fact, we've, I think, had our first resignation of an administrator.
We have. You're correct. We have Bruce Bilson at the City of Whittlesea, because he's been appointed as the Small Business Ombudsman by the federal government. So obviously can't do both those roles. So we'll be keeping an eye on who's going to be appointed to that panel of administrators, which is led by Lydia Wilson, of course, out of the City of Whittlesea, because they're in place for this term of council.
Exactly. And Chris, the other things I've got is that Local Government Victoria is calling for a working group in the consultation on asset management. Really important topic because of rate capping, the new act, asset management. When you look at the balance sheets of councils and the role of the asset management plan in the strategic planning framework of the organisation is a really critical touch point. So highly encourage anyone with interest and expertise to get involved in that. And the final one I had, Chris, was that the Local Government Victoria is calling for comments on the draft electoral regulations, and that will include, it's proposed to include extension of the ability to nominate, for some people to nominate remotely due to COVID impacts for so long as COVID affects, and also a change so that what actually happened last time is more enshrined, that the candidate training would continue to be hosted by Local Government Victoria and be an online module rather than delivered by the councils, which I would have thought there would be just about unanimous applause for. But the other thing, for people who do have a strong view about candidate training, Local Government Victoria will be seeking feedback on the content of that training, which I'm sure will get a lot of interest from candidates and officers because of that tension that Hannah talked about previously around the fact that it needs to be rigorous enough to provide some guidance as to the role of council, but it can't be a barrier to entry, and that'll always cause some tension.
It occurs to me, Steve, it would be really interesting at this particular juncture to hear from new councillors, first-time councillors who did that training last year, are now coming to grips with the role, and to understand how much did it do to help prepare them for the task ahead and understanding where their role sits in the scheme of things.
Absolutely. I think that's a really good point, Chris. You should make a comment.
I think I just did. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. Of course, Hannah Duncan-Jones spoke to us about that review on a recent episode of the governance update. And she must be nearly due to join us in the next couple of weeks, I think, for more implementation matters updates. Thank you, Steve. I think I've exhausted my list. Have you exhausted yours?
I have, in fact, Chris, and it's been very nice to share and to take turns too. So thank you for doing that.
Okay, we're just trying to demonstrate how it works in council land, in local government land. Thank you, Steve. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week for another governance update.
Cheers, Chris. You too.
And thank you for joining us here on VLGA Connect. See you again soon.